part to me of the Theories of Everything channel is also exploring what does it mean to have a theory of everything. It's clear to a physicist because a physicist thinks extremely reductionistically, and I'm not sure reductionism is true. It seems like if we think of the world in reductionistic terms, then we get extremely powerful tools. And it seems like those are the most powerful tools. They can destroy us. That's how powerful they are. We've never had the ability to destroy ourselves.
So effectively,
yeah,
anyways.
Right. And that's because of science. I'm not saying that's good. It's obviously not good that we can kill ourselves, but it's powerful, that's for sure. So a reductionistic approach seems to be extremely powerful.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for making this happen.
Man, I apologize for earlier and pushing it.
No, I totally understand. I don't totally understand. I can attempt to empathize, but that sounds horrible.
It's not pleasant. It wasn't pleasant.
And you said you were taking. What did you take to try to fall asleep? You did some melatonin or?
I took CBD, melatonin, magnesium, and B6.
And finally that was enough to tank you out?
No, and it was horrible. So for your audience, I just apologize if I'm not in top form.
No, I mean,
we can always do this again as well, provided they're not sick of me.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm sure this will be a fun time, anyways. Honestly, it feels like it's not like this sounds like this is that unusual as far as getting to know Curt Jaimungal. Anyways, you seem like a guy who just like goes at it super, super, super hard. Like, I on your meme channel on Reddit, there's my favorite meme of you is it's like a 4-hour meditation, and it's like this psychedelic background, and you're on like 6 times speed of this silent meditation.
Yeah, that was from someone said. Yes, I think someone made a Twitter joke that I would be the type that listens to mindfulness meditation at double speed or some sentiment like that.
Somehow
it defeats the purpose.
Faster. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's counterintuitive, but it's. I mean, but I get the sense though. Like, just how do you take in the amount of information you seem to be trying to take in? Like you're booking, multiple podcasts per day. Like I can't do more than a podcast a week. It emotionally wrecks me every time I try to get this deep with anybody. I don't do that ordinarily.
I'm doing that right now because I have, which I can tell you off air, I have a somewhat huge podcast coming up where I'm being interviewed. And so after that, then all of my stress should dissipate. The day after that, actually, because the day after I have some more work. But then the day after that, so 2 days after that, then I'm going to take a huge break. Building up to that, I'm just going all out because I want to, it's like a bear. Or someone who hibernates, I want to have some material that I can start to release over November.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when's the last time you've actually taken you were working on your movie up before you started I guess even part of the channel was even to do with the film, right?
Yeah.
And then you've been doing this pretty constantly over the past year, tons. I mean, it's just like, it looks like just a ton of research and then a talk and then a ton more research and then a talk.
Yeah, that's right. It's like Sisyphus in some manner. In many ways, because I have an AMA coming out later today. I'm not sure when this is airing, but either way, today is October.
Probably in a couple weeks.
Okay, so today's October 28th. In a few hours, I have an AMA coming out. And I mentioned this, that it feels like a blur. Almost all of my exams, I call them exams. Almost all of my podcasts are like exams. And when you write an exam, you forget it a few weeks later.
Immediately.
Which means, see, one should meditate on the Bible as well as read it. It's not enough to read the Bible, and I've just been reading. So I haven't had a chance to meditate on it. I haven't had a chance to think and sit with my thoughts on any of the toes. So that's what I'm getting to do over the break, and hopefully it won't be so much of a blur. Hopefully I can recollect and recontextualize.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like every time I try to dig into. I mean, I'm not taking on as much of an undertaking as trying to learn an entire theory of everything, and then try and because I mean, every time I read a new book, it's like I need some time to live it out a little bit and let my being digest whatever it was that I just took into me, or else again it just kind of falls out the back, right? Like. I just tried to power through because I got to chat with Ian McGilchrist last week.
Great, yeah.
And that was so fun.
How long did that book
but I mean,
take to read? Still reading it.
Well, I mean, there was parts of it that I read actually like looking at it, but a lot of it I did unaudible.
Yeah.
And I went through it. I went through the first half twice because I'd started it earlier this year, and then he confirmed that he was willing to do an interview. And so I was like, okay, I want to start this over and just really chew on these ideas. So I went a pretty slow pace for the first bit, and just it took like about a month to go through the first half, and then I only had a week left until the talk, and I was like, shit.
Yeah.
So that whole week I had to get through 15 hours or 16 hours of audiobook, and it was just like every night it was like these are such like transformative ideas. I was like, I want to go and live this. Like this feels like it's going to change my life. I want to go and have this transform my life. And I mean, I'm glad. I mean, I've kind of made a commitment to just kind of slow down. Like I was doing 2 podcasts a week at the beginning of the year, and then it was 1 a week, and now it's 1 every 2 weeks, and probably we'll get to 1 a month. Because I mean, I don't have a long-term goal with this. This is just kind of I felt like I wanted to do it. Right.
Right. I saw some of your songs. By the way, you sound great. You sound like Coldplay.
Thanks so much, man. Well, Coldplay is definitely a big inspiration, though. I feel like I have a bit of I have to apologize for that a little bit more these days. I mean, if you say that like 20 years ago, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Coldplay, incredible band." At this point, people are more like, "Oh, don't they go like that kind of pop rock band, kind of just
I'm an
generic?"
old soul, so I'm like 20. My mind is behind 20 years in music.
Yeah, I was going to ask even like what kind of music are you into?
Don't listen to music.
Obviously, again, like
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess you listen to my music, so I'm your top played artist recently.
Sorry.
So I guess you checked out my music, so I'm your top played artist right now.
Actually, well, let me think. You may be the most recent song I've listened to.
Oh man,
let me think.
You got to get that looked at, Curt.
Let me think. And that was 1 week ago. So let me think. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't maybe some songs in movies when they play in the background, but that I press play on myself. Yeah, right. I believe you're the most recent.
I found I have to go back to music after I've been like exploring philosophy for a little while, because it's almost this whole spiritual realm where, like, again, when I learn how to see new patterns in life or something like that, like whenever, again, reading stuff like the Master and His Emissary or listening to Vervaeke's lectures, getting through a ton of that, I go back and it's just like music comes to life in a new way. You know, having a conversation with my wife comes to life in a new way. But music especially is interesting to me because, like, there's so much music. I mean, I teach music theory to kids for my main paycheck every week.
Nice.
And so there's a lot of interesting overlap just in the, I guess, even the math side of music, like the music theory side of music, where a lot of these ideas start to line up as well, which is really...
Have you heard of Stefan Alexander? He's a physicist.
Stefan Alexander.
A book called The Jazz of Physics. Talks about the connection between music and physics.
Well, I mean, that sounds amazing. I'm gonna add that to the list of guys to check out and go. I mean, does he do like podcasts and stuff too, or is it primarily I got to go sit there and get through
but he doesn't do podcasts. He's not the interviewer. Okay. He's the interviewee.
Sure.
Yeah, and I have one coming
I want to check that out.
See, whenever someone says there's a connection between music and reality, I don't know. I don't see it other than there exist patterns. And then someone saying, well, music is patterned. Right. And then when someone says music is connected to physics, well, okay, there's the strings and there's resonance. But it's like unfledged. It's not particularly deep, but I haven't thought about it much.
Music is sort of it's something that, you could argue that to some extent animals have a sort of musical way of communicating, which sure, that's interesting, and maybe if you push it hard enough, you might be able to find some music theory overlap there. But like sure, it's patterns, but it's a distinctly human. It's to do with human evolution or human communication and the human's like intuitive sense of those patterns. And it's just interesting that the mathematical relationships that show up in music, basically it's like mining the subconscious of humans and seeing, oh yeah, or essentially, basically you can almost mathematically find the archetypes of, I don't know, I'm probably stepping out beyond my, beyond my understanding.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Like it's obviously it's not like that the nature of reality, like reality couldn't exist without music, but music is a really interesting expression of the human intuition about the patterns about reality. And then it's just like, so I mean, I have a really I just like to think about evolution in those terms, as far as like the longer an evolutionary system has had to sit around, it's kind of reached what does Dawkins say, a stable or an E. He has a little acronym or something for it, but anyways, a generally stable kind of harmony. It's like the longer it gets to one of those, the more I feel like, okay, it's settled into something that like is sort of consistent with reality on some level.
Have you
right? And so no, go forward.
Have you watched Better Left Unsaid?
I watched it yesterday.
Oh wow! Okay, so there's the concept in it called conserved memes, which is based on conserved genes, which reminds me of what you are referring to.
Let's see.
It was in the latter
my
half.
memory. Where was that?
It may be in the director's cut only.
Okay.
Essentially, if something has survived for quite some time, then it gets conserved, and that's one of the reasons that how our genes can vary, obviously, or you don't have variation.
Right.
Some genes vary more. They vary in their variability, and the ones that are the most conserved are called conserved genes, and those are like embryonic development genes that you don't want to tinker with. And then I make the argument that some of what's going on in religious stories are like conserved memes. They're memes that have been around for so long that they perhaps have influenced our own development as well, and that you mess around with that
some of the craziest,
to one's peril.
Some of the craziest things that they've discovered about like studying. Well, I mean, even I just recently read this. Obviously, he was in the Master and Emissary. He was talking about how they take Mozart or Bach or various of these composers and play them to cultures that that are totally unexposed to Western culture, Western music, and they immediately emotionally grasp it. It's not something that has to do with it's not a cultural construct, right? It's something that's deeply in tune with whatever somehow the evolution of human consciousness. Like it's like music is, I don't know. Yeah, it's weird. It somehow connects to something really, really deep in us.
See, what's interesting is the only music that I seek out, there's only one. That is, I'll occasionally go on the subreddit of Eminem and see if he has a new song. But then I'm wondering, well, if you played Eminem's music to some other culture, unless they understand English, they're just going to get the sentiment, the emotion behind the music, and that's it.
Right.
So then what does that say about myself? Wonder. Anyway. Okay.
As far as you're listening to Eminem?
Sorry?
What does that say as far as you're listening to
Why is it that I like
Eminem?
Music that's highly verbal, that is rap, rather than
right
tonal?
Well, but I mean, it doesn't matter if it's more rhythmic or more tonal, because the same mathematical relationships show up. There's a really, I think this is a really, really easy video to grasp, even if you're not a music theory nerd, that Adam Neely does, and I can send it to you. It's about a 45-minute little presentation he does, but he talks about how there's a concept in music called polymeters, which is the overlay of different time signatures. So like, taking... Okay. Like time signatures is like there's three or three, like a heavy pulse and then two soft pulses, right? And four, right? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. But then a polymeter would be doing those both at the same time. So
okay, and what happens?
That's one of the most pleasant polymeters, because every couple snaps we get. They land on the same beat, right? Okay. And that's I think that's basically the lowest, or it's the simplest way of getting into that groove where you have a little bit of disagreement, but then you have synchronization, right? Which all of the let's just do a step by step. So from there, what you can do is if you take even just that sound of my me clicking like that, if you were to speed up that audio a couple hundred times, you would get basically. I mean, every tonal note that you hear is just a certain vibration, right? It's just a certain sound a certain number of times per second, right? So the chords are different mathematical relationships between different frequencies of sound, right? And so that mathematical relationship that you're hearing is the same thing as a perfect fifth, right? Which is the most uniformly, everybody considers that a pleasant harmony.
That's interesting.
Right? That's the most fundamental chord in almost every culture's music. I might be overstating a little bit to say that. I'd have to look into that, but I think it's just about every culture has a sense of the perfect fifth, right?
Yeah.
And
continue.
That perfect fifth, again, that ratio. So again, you could just break it down to mathematical ratios. All of the most pleasant, again, or there's even, this goes a little too deep, but let's just start there. So there's the perfect fifth anyways. That, if you take any mathematical expression of phi or the golden ratio, which I'm sure that's come up a couple times in your investigation of theories of everything.
Okay.
If you take any, has it or not? No, okay.
Surprisingly,
so phi is crazy.
In many ways. It's overhyped, but then maybe it's not. It seems to be the most irrational number. But as if you
take any mathematical expression of phi and you play it musically, it becomes a perfect fifth, basically.
Interesting.
And all of the, or at least it becomes part of the overtone series of a perfect fifth, because again, when you
interesting.
vibrate two different acoustic objects together, you get an overtone series too. So there's other notes kind of hidden underneath the main harmony. So it can get kind of technical and stuff like that, but the basic principle there is just that like it relates to real mathematical. There are real patterns.
Yeah. I find so that example with the snapping of the fingers, that's interesting because I don't think of rhythm as related to chords per se, and then you demonstrated that. So that's. I have a question about music. So I see the drum set behind you. When you change, let's say I'm playing on the guitar, and you go a half step lower because you, for whatever reason, you want to tune it like that. Do you tune the drums to match? Do people tune drums?
It depends on. So I mean, it depends on how much of a nerd you are. There are some engineers that like really, really love this stuff, and they'll tune the drum set to the key of the song they're playing in. So that way,
so what's the tone?
That way, you
How do you find the pitch of a hit? It just sounds like a hit.
It's a lot harder. There's some. There are some easier examples to notice the pitch of the drum, especially like if you listen to. You're not listening to current music, but listen to Silk Sonic's song "Leave the Door Open." That's Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak, and they have it's a super catchy, very fun song, kind of a revival of Motown. But I seriously check it out; it's so fun. But in that song, the drums are tuned to the same key that they're in, and bongos and stuff like that, where they have a little bit more of a boom, boom. You hear a bit more of the tone to it. But even the snare and the kick drum do have that. It's just
in Trinidad.
Right. Which are more intentionally musical.
Yeah. And I wouldn't consider that to be a drum. It's more like the xylophone in the shape of a drum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've done this too. I've tried to get my. The thing is, it's kind of hard to tune drums to a particular note, and you have to keep tuning them, and it takes a while to tune drums too. So a lot of times, especially the way your mix kind of rock drums, like the kick drum is so low you don't really know what note it is, and the snare drum is kind of hugely muffled, and the attack is very short. So it's not so much about being harmonious; it's just more about having that sense of. Ugh. But you can still find those sort of patterns in the rhythm. Do you play a bit of guitar? I mean, I've noticed in the background of your.
I haven't played in guitar. I don't know the last time I've taken it down and played it. Maybe a year, and then before that, 1 year. So 1 year spans. But the reason is, since I moved in here, the walls are so thin, and when I play, I sing, and I sing quite loud. I essentially sing 90s rock, like Nirvana, and
Great,
Our Lady
great.
Peace. You're Canadian, correct?
Yes, I
All
am.
right,
Yeah.
Our Lady. I want to interview Rain Maida.
Okay.
You know who Rain Maida is?
I
The
was
lead
hoping I
singer of
wouldn't have to
Our
admit to
Lady
not
Peace.
knowing of any. See, I should know my music shit because I obviously I am a musician, but I had the unfortunate. I appreciate my parents and the way they brought me up. There was a lot of really great richness to the religious upbringing I had, but unfortunately, I didn't experience
I
the
see,
world
I
of
see.
music until I
Alanis
became
Morissette?
an adult.
Do you know Alanis Morissette?
I only know Alanis Morissette because my wife got made fun of by her bosses for not knowing who she was, so we had to go look up who Alanis Morissette was.
One of my favorite songs is called Uninvited by Alanis Morissette.
Okay.
Beautiful. Another favorite, so this is slightly modern. There's a song called Young and Beautiful by Lana Del Rey. I love that song. I love
Lana Del Rey.
and they're both similar, Uninvited and Young and Beautiful. Not in what they're expressing, but in how they sound.
Yeah. She has this like just beautiful kind
Yeah.
of aching, tragic element to her music that I don't know. It resonates with. I think it especially resonates with a lot of young women right now.
Ah.
I can't. I don't want to try and I don't want to go too deep into trying to theorize as to why, but it is interesting as to like how she's gained traction in her music.
So do you play video games?
I do play video
What?
games.
Which ones?
I was wondering if we were going to chat about video games today. I heard that you said you just bought Hades.
Yeah. Oh, so you watched
And,
the AMA.
I watched a chunk of it,
Okay.
and then I was trying to keep watching this morning, but it was not available
Yeah,
anymore.
sorry about that. I could, well,
It's all right.
it's coming out tonight.
But
yeah.
but I have played a lot of that game.
Yeah?
That is a fun game. And honestly, that's what reignited my... I definitely... I want to go back and read the Iliad now. I haven't actually rocked my way through that before. But the lore... I mean, the gameplay itself, it's a really, really engaging loop, which it's fun that it's a loop too, because there's a certain... I don't know. That feels right to me for the sort of story.
Yeah.
But it gets you, again, also really emotionally attached to all these characters in Greek mythology, which is a lot of fun. And then afterwards, I had to go and...
The amount of voice acting they did is phenomenal.
I know.
And writing.
It's
for a small game
it's
like that.
insane.
So here's an example. I died 3 times so far. I haven't beaten this lady.
Yeah.
I forget her name. The first boss. I'm assuming she's the first boss for everyone. I don't know.
Yeah.
She has one
Yeah,
wing.
she is.
Okay,
Yeah,
whatever.
I should know her name, but yeah.
And when I was leaving,
Megira.
every time I die, there's I think Hypnos. She's like
Yep.
a sleepy person, like myself right now.
Yeah.
She would
The one who
comment
enters you into the
differently
gates of Hades.
each time.
Yeah. You're going to be surprised. It's not even just like a dozen or so. It's hundreds and hundreds of pieces of dialogue.
Wow. Now, super.
It's different
I'm
every
just gonna
time.
quickly
I've
look this
played
up.
that game.
Super giant.
I've got up to the point where I've beat it, I think 20 times, 20 or 30 times. Like there's just I won't spoil anything, but it's not a super long game. You can sit down and beat it in a sitting once you're able to beat it. And I've beat it about 30 times and I still have not had the same piece of dialogue twice.
Wow.
I've played over 100 or 150 rounds, before I didn't win all of them, right?
I haven't played any of Supergiant's other games. So I thought Supergiant was the... No, I'm mistaking them. Well, doesn't matter.
That was even what my friend... The first Supergiant game I had heard of was Bastion, which I guess is their first big game. And that was the first kind of praise I heard from it from one of my friends was just, you have to play this game. The voice acting is badass. It's just such an epic universe that pulls you in, and it's so rich. It just keeps on giving more to the story.
Yeah.
But I found playing that to be a lot of fun. I'm
I'm checking
interested to
the
hear about
trophies
your
right now,
relationship
the
with video
trophy-
games too. Are you going
what
to see
people
what
call
how
trophy
much?
So I'm checking out the trophies for this is the most relaxed podcast, and I hope you don't think that I'm being rude. I'm trying to get some. Well, I'm
man.
trying to expand on
Just
some of
enjoy
the points. Hades, because I'm curious. Well, how long does it take? Okay, 70 hours. No missable trophies. Great, because I love platinuming.
The 100%ing games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably more I don't know. Like in order to get, I've probably put in close to 70 hours in this game, and I don't have like there's so much you can do. Even I mean, maybe there's a percentage system.
Do you have a PS5?
But like you can keep going. I have a PS4, but I've actually been playing it on my Switch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wanted.
Easier to kind of.
I was thinking of it was going to be either Returnal or Hades. I chose Hades, and I think I chose wisely.
Yeah, I think so. It's a very accessible game, and again, it the lore is so good. Like it's just it really makes these characters come to life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read much like or got into Greek mythology at all, but it immediately made me like I've got to go back and read some of this stuff. Like I went.
The character that we play, is he a true Greek mythological character?
That's the only thing I'm not sure about yet. I think if he's in there, he's got to be kind of one of those B tier characters in the canon that you only know about if you really know your stuff. Either that or they just made him up.
I know God of War, they made up Kratos, correct or no?
They made right. I think so.
Yeah.
I mean that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. And the bosses that you fight, are they made up as well? At least the first one.
Not
Let's speak
all of
about
them.
The first one.
Bagheera, I think, is made up.
Don't spoil it for me, please.
I think there's other ones that are real, but I think maybe her specific name is made up, but there's like the group she comes. I think there might be the Furies might be a real. She and her two sisters. That might be a real thing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though that with like you get to know Achilles and all these. I guess right after playing this game, I was just strolling through chapters and I saw anything that had like that looked Greek. I was like, okay, I want to probably look at that. So I just recently read what's it called, The Song of Achilles. Have you heard of this?
No.
It's just like a novel adaptation of the story of Achilles and Patroclus, which you're going to get to know a little bit in this game, but it kind of hyper emphasizes the gay aspect of the story, which is subliminal if it's in there at all. in the original story, anyways.
Yeah.
And but the story is really well told. It's really gripping and engaging emotionally. But afterwards, I was like, okay, I want to go check out I need to read some of this original. I did not realize how like the even the way the writing style is in the Iliad is like so brutal. I was just reading a passage about the death of, or just in battle, and they talk about, okay, and his jaw, or they threw a spear through his jaw, and it was hanging by a sinew, and blood splurted out behind his eyes, and then he crushed his head. And it's like, it's not just, okay, this is how many people died. It's this really, really dramatic, really present sense of like, I've never read something that brutal.
By the way, am I coming through your speakers or your headphones?
I think it's just the speed. Are you hearing yourself?
Yeah.
You gotta. Let me just double check on. I might be able to fix that.
We're in Canada. Where in Ontario are you?
Let me just check. Are you still hearing a
no
feedback?
No.
Okay, then maybe I fixed it.
Great.
All right, we'll see.
And that may mean that the audio, if you're recording yours separately and the mine separately, there may be some conflicts because mine will be picked up by yours. Just so you know.
And you've got video on your side too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna make sure. We could start the video now, but I am right now about, depending on how bad traffic is, I'm about an hour and a half from Toronto. I live in Ayr, but right now my studio is kind of, you can see it's this kind of loft area in my parents' place I rent from them, and that's in Paris, Ontario.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in Brantford, spent a lot of time.
Oh, nice.
Kind of hang out in Hamilton and stuff.
Nice. Yeah, they have an extremely cheap buffet there that I used to frequent.
Yeah, you talked before about how you're a pretty frugal guy.
Yeah.
You not. I mean, if this channel keeps picking up, you're gonna have to figure out something to spend that cash on.
Well, I don't care about fame, but I do care about fame in a certain subset of people, and that is restaurant managers. I want to be able to go to, and I'm not even kidding about this. I mean this. I want to be able to go to a restaurant and then have someone say, this is on me, so-and-so. Here's something extra.
And what kind of restaurant is this you want to go to? Still a cheap Chinese buffet?
Well, with my wife now, I go to what would be considered to be, I think, those $2 or $3 when you search on Google instead of $1 which it would. I still buy McDonald's frequently though. I love McDonald's, love Wendy's. Wendy's is my favorite.
Wow. You look way too healthy to be somebody that eats McDonald's and Wendy's
on a regular basis. Yeah, well, I have a policy that I'm not allowed to eat generally unless I've worked out. So I pretty much work out in order to feed my food habit, literally. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, so how does this exchange system work? You got to like one push-up per calorie?
No. I have a document that records my workouts, and I just know if it's enough. Okay, so this is a great day that I've done enough. Well, it's not extremely formalized.
I mean, your face is clear. How are you not like covered in pimples with all this greasy shit?
No, I break out. But I don't think I'm extremely lucky that my stomach almost never gets upset from food. Almost never. So like people say Taco Bell hurts their stomach. I can eat 2-day-old Taco Bell on the counter and love it firstly.
Oh my God,
and then
man.
I have an iron stomach. And I forget I was going somewhere with that. You have to excuse my habitudinous nature right now.
See, this is the stuff that's funny to me because I guess like, I mean, so you and I are into some similar stuff as far as just like, well, just have a good day to get to sit down and listen to a long audiobook about some nature of existence or listen to Jordan Peterson lectures or listen to John Vervaeke, listen to these guys give talks, right? But for me, the way that, and maybe this is just a personality thing, but it makes me I get this sense of self-loathing that like my life needs to be different. I'm learning, like every time something emotionally impacts me, like I hear this like story about the hero, or I hear some story about what love or what wisdom means. And I'm like, yeah, oh man, there's so many ways in which my life is like, doesn't look like that. How do I live harmony? How do I live, reciprocal opening? How do I, and like, I don't know if this is just, but like I feel bad when I eat unhealthy, or when I'm not getting enough sleep, or all these things, because it's like it seems like every little action I do in my day is a little microcosmic story of who I am, and it's like if those stories don't, like especially I don't know, obviously I just powered through 16 hours of The Master and His Emissary last week, and so it's really on my mind. But it's like if I'm unconsciously or subconsciously training myself to see the world in all these different ways, whether I'm consciously deciding to think it that way or not, then like that genuinely is shaping my being, right? If the story that exists in my food that I'm eating, if I can think of it that way, if that's not a silly way to say it, if that story isn't in line with like the way, the Tao, whatever, then I'm ingesting and I'm becoming something that isn't, I
understand what you're saying.
I drink way too much coffee. I eat way too much candy. I can't eat candy.
Oh yeah. So for me, I'm more concerned with the fact that I eat meat than what type of meat I eat, because I feel bad about the suffering of the animals. Factory farms are horrible places.
Totally.
I became a vegetarian for a while because of that. But I don't think what's called junk food, is actually terrible for you. It depends. When people say this is a horrible food, you have to say horrible compared to what and for who. There's a certain amount of plutonium in your body. Just very few people know that. There's a lower limit and an upper limit to virtually every compound. So when someone says, well, that's junk. Yeah, Freakonomics said that the most healthy, cheap food on the planet available on pretty much every part of the planet is the McDouble of McDonald's. I don't know if you know that, because it has 32 grams of protein or 20 grams of protein, and then quite a few vitamins. It's mainly the buns that are horrible, so I try not to eat too much of them.
Really?
Yeah, well, it's mainly sugar that's horrible.
Right. Okay.
Carbs. When I say sugar, I mean carbs.
Sure. I would just, I guess I don't know. There's sort of a visceral reaction to grease. It's just like, oh, that looks bad for me.
Yeah. There's a horrible nature to vegetable oils in general. So that's true. If it was grease,
But so
yeah, sorry.
no, I mean, but just to riff off of what you're saying, so it's like it's the most affordable and sort of
Plentiful,
healthy thing you can get.
Affordable, plentiful, healthy. If you can check those boxes.
We've solved, the poverty or just about solved the issue of like people not being able, like starvation is almost within reach to say we've solved that as humanity, right? Or at least some people talk like that. As far as like there's just we've figured out such incredible ways of mass producing food, right? And if this continues, then maybe nobody will be starving. People won't be starving. Starvation won't be a big issue, right?
Yeah, I think obesity is more of an issue than starvation.
Right. But so within that, so it's like we've solved the problem as far as the way we've pitched the problem is that people don't have enough to eat, and I mean that seems like a genuine problem. I guess I don't know enough of the technical science about health to say, but I guess I kind of more appeal to an intuitive sense of again evolutionary systems. It's like when you try to distill down what you think is the most, what health means in terms of food, in terms of like what the body needs, and obviously our models for this are like pretty good. They're a lot better than they used to be. Like we can kind of model what vitamins a human needs, but we're still doing. There's still this level of oh man, my vocabulary has shrunk today. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night either, but I can't complain. I slept more than you. But there's oh God, there's a simple word for just thinking you know more than you do.
Dunning-Kruger?
I mean, yeah, that's the word that was coming to mind, but there's
I don't know.
Whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. It's just like it's always still a model of health, and the more we let me say this slower.
Say it in a different manner.
Let me see if I can get to a different manner. I guess it's just whether or not we've solved the problem of what it is exactly humans need, what health is. I mean, that's kind of a pretty big statement to make, is to say we know what health is, or we know what being healthy is, or we know what being whole is.
Let me add to that. There's also an element of enjoyment. So, for example, if what was best for me to let's say live longer was to eat just cabbage. Let's imagine it's just that. I would choose to live a shorter life with other foods. So there's an element of how much do you enjoy a certain food, and then is it okay for you because of your body composition and your vitals, if you measure your blood and you check the stats of that and so on. So I think for me, I'm not recommending this for everyone. I think for me, it's fine. Wendy's and Taco Bell, it's 100%. Well, not 100%, but it's fine. And I do imagine that I'm rationalizing.
Well, it's again though. It's a.
I just love it.
It's a scenario
for
where
me that's my pleasure.
But it's a scenario where you are kind of taking stock of what you think it means to be healthy, and you're saying it meets these this list of criteria of I need to have this much fat, this much these vitamins, that.
I remember
right?
I asked
this much protein.
My doctor when I was a kid, I said, "Is it okay?" And I think he's wrong. What he told me, I'm pretty sure what he told me was wrong. But I was like 15 or 14. I said, "Is it okay if all I did was just eat chips?" And then I had a protein shake because I get the correct amount of protein and I take a multivitamin. He said, yeah, as long as you get your nutrients. I don't know if what he said was true, but that influenced me for a little while.
But like that seems to me to be a problem. Like that's that stupid word that I can't seem to think of. Why can't I think of it? I want that word. But that's that's trying to so health is the mysterious ideal. You're trying to extract the territory from the map of health, right? So the reason I feel more of a sense of trust in an evolutionarily stable system where an entity and its food co-evolve is that you have a really, really long testing period to see, okay, this food and this creature eating this food, this is a healthy scenario. It works, right? But
Yeah.
and it's not because you can put it to certain testing criteria. It's okay. Well, so they're getting this much, again, all of these different little elements, this much, these vitamins, this much vitamin D, this much vitamin E, this much, all this stuff, all this much protein, but that it just doesn't account for whatever we can't account for. And the evolutionarily stable system does.
Yeah. Well, what occurs to me is that what's happened evolutionarily isn't the only facet, because then we wouldn't drink from these ceramic cups or from plastic cups or have air conditioning or speak on the internet. Is that evolutionary? So,
Right.
So obviously there's an element of what do we want and what's comfortable and so on that we have to take into account too. And because what if the extreme is that we're just like in the Matrix and we just have tubes coming into us and then that just preserves our life? We're the most healthy. Well, we don't care about being healthy per se. We care about something else, and health is in service to that something else.
Right. Well, I mean, to me, and I've gone back into these stories and tried to think about what they mean, to me, I guess, 100 times, but they keep on coming back. And for some reason, I keep going to the story of creation, the story of the fall in the Bible really resonates with me a lot lately, thinking about this idea of, okay, so when we figure out some new piece of technology, it allows us to have access to sort of alter settings about the universe that we didn't previously have access to. That's, to me, I can really relate that to the sort of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Not in that, if you view that as okay, the tree is just sin or evil, you shouldn't do it. I don't think that's a good understanding, but it's just okay, it's knowledge that of what is good and what is evil for yourself. It's okay, so now I can basically, if I could just reach into my brain and just change how much whatever I don't know why I'm speaking so poorly today, but
I'm enervated.
I could just change how much. If you, we have drugs, right? We have emotional altering drugs, right? We can just reach into our brains and say, I want this much dopamine, right? We can just decide how much dopamine is in your brain. I don't know exactly how antidepressants work, but assuming that's how some of them work anyways, we now have that power in our hands to decide how much dopamine would be good and how much would be evil, or would it be evil to not have any dopamine? Would it be evil to be sad, right? We're taking that knowledge for ourselves and saying, we understand what is good for the brain. And when you're in that situation, potentially you overstepped your bounds of your understanding with your power.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. And so and when that happens, then it's then you're not fit to be in the Holy of Holies. You're not fit to have access to sort of the kernel of existence or whatever. I don't know exactly what the Garden of Eden is, but it's there's this sort of fall. But so I don't know. I mean, I'm emotionally, I'm just thinking about technology lately that it's okay, I think Eric Weinstein said we're like gods, but for the wisdom. That really has resonated with me, and I don't know. Maybe it's just that I don't, I'm not scientifically trained enough to even understand what it is that we have access to. But I get this intuitive sense of this is too much control. Do we our humanities are grossly squelched in comparison to the our culture's obsession with the sciences, right? We have so much understanding of how to alter the universe, but we put very little effort into trying to understand how we should be altering it. That religion is not a majority position, at least, or it seems to be going down, right?
Yeah.
Vervaeke says that the nuns are no religion. The nuns are the fastest growing population in the United States.
Nuns as in N-O-N-E.
North America. N-O-N, okay. Yes, yeah. Right? It's we're becoming more and more obsessed with our models of reality, but we don't have any sense of a respect or any sense of okay, let's try and get more deeply in touch with whatever it is that's truly real, or I don't know, because I mean, part of the problem is like, what are you going to do with a degree in literature or in philosophy or in religion, other than maybe your best chance of getting paid decently well is to start a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
But like, where are the outlets? I mean, there's not spiritual communities everywhere. I think that's something we're really, really, really lacking. But like, I guess some people are looking for that, but like, there's not places to do anything. So it's not sort of economically viable to go and study these things. So I don't know. It's a multiple leveled problem there, but like, we don't know what to do with our power is what I feel like.
Yeah, when you study literature and religion at universities, you're not studying it for the point of changing your life. It perhaps used to be that. Now it's purely academic, it's clinical. Yeah.
And like that sort of ought to be what's like the humanities, as far as like, you know, genuine. So for one thing, you said, yeah, the desire for personal change or like discovering the ideal isn't even there.
Mm-hmm.
The humanities are treated as this sort of academic thing. But for one thing, that's missing. But then that has to, that ought to be what drives, you know, the sciences and redirects them and shapes them.
Yeah, people don't realize how much the Catholic Church did a number on people, that to this day, all of science thinks of itself as being completely anti-religion. Yeah, they're they're religiophobic, if that's a word. Godophobic is a word that I use.
Godophobic.
Yeah, well, they don't want to use the term God. Theophobic, I'm sure, is the actual word, but...
Yeah, that sounds nicer. But it's... I mean, there are like I even listened to... I mean, Einstein had a sort of agnostic sense of the spiritual. Carl Sagan, the way he talked about the frontier of knowledge was... And science was very kind of romantic. There's some really great little one-liner quotes from those guys, but that's not really in the spirit of... I was talking to a friend of mine earlier today who's an English professor, and he's a great guy. I've had him, you know, we had some conversations for this project too. His name's Ken. But even there, we were talking about this, and I said, like, you know, he was kind of trying to defend some of the academics he knew, saying, like, you know, there's a lot of sort of people who really contributed something to science, who were religious or had a sense of the spiritual or had a sense of like of the philosophical to them. They weren't just scientific ideologues. But I was like, yeah, so sure. I mean, Gandhi says, I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians. I like your idea of science as being this thing that wants to update and keep on searching for truth and better understanding reality. But I don't like, or I even like maybe your venerated saints of science who are at the forefront, who are really contributing something. But the common people I know who their sense of the scientific institution is just that it's right 100%. There's no room for error, and there's no frontier to our knowledge. It's just more. There's like anything we find more is just going to add to this. It's not going to, you know.
Well, they would see the opposite. They would say, well, we're the ones that are humble as scientists, and we're the ones that admit our ignorance and say that every fact is tentative, whereas the religious are those who would say that these are, well, they'll use the word dogmatic. These are precepts, that are incontestable.
And to some extent, that kind of makes sense to me. And again, like, so somebody actually practicing science is like, I like your scientists, but I don't like your common people who appeal to science. I'm not sure the word for that group. You know, the people who treat scientists and science as if it's this perfect thing.
Yeah, there's a word for it. It's called scientism.
Like scientism, mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't know what like. I don't know. There's not word for people who are scientistimists, right? So yeah, so there ought to be a humility in this, but so you said, like, okay, so with religion, there's like there is dogma to it. and I was thinking about that earlier today too. That there sort of has to be, because that's the only way you get something to act on from the top down perspective. Because, so I mean, science is concerned with the phenomena of the world, at least on the bottom, and then kind of codifying it and abstracting. It's not even so much about, it's like abstracting a principle and then testing it until there's a very, very high likelihood of it being, a particular statement about reality being correct, right? So it's like it's not about. I mean, the religious side of looking for truth is getting kind of an intuitive sense of the way things are, and it's a really, really big general sense of the way things are. Whereas science seeks to prove very small claims and prove them with a lot of force, and with a lot of data, right? And so, and they're just trying to do fundamentally different things. So to kind of make a religious truth, I mean, again, there still needs to be that humility there, which a lot of people lack.
Look, there's this quote from Hillary Putnam, who I think most people would think of as an atheist, but he said that Aristotle was profoundly correct in saying that there are two spheres of knowledge that are distinct. That is the practical, which he called ethics, and then the knowledge-based one, which we now call science. And that as soon as we as a culture can see that the sphere of knowledge of science, the sphere of knowledge is wider than that sphere encompassed by science, the sooner we can come to a sane view of ourselves and of science.
I think you said the sooner the circle of ethics is wider than the circle of science?
The sooner we see that all of knowledge is not just all of scientific knowledge. There's knowledge that doesn't encompass scientific knowledge, that isn't comprised. There's knowledge. And
what would be the outcome,
What science comprises isn't all of knowledge.
Right. But I think part of the problem of being sort of a pleb in our current world is that there seems to be so much science that it's like, it almost becomes this religious thing where it's like, somebody has an answer for this. There's like, science probably has an answer to all of my questions. Like, to anybody who's not, on the frontier of the knowledge of any particular scientific model, it seems like science is this big thing that, because it obviously has more knowledge than I have, right?
Yeah. I don't like when people say so-and-so is like a religion. Like, they'll point to science. People who dislike science as a religion will say, yeah, science is like a religion. They'll say so-and-so is like a religion, therefore it's bad. I think that part of our issue is that we consider all of that's religion to be bad. So perhaps we shouldn't be saying science is like... What they mean is science is dogmatic. Religion has an element of dogmatism, but that's not the same as saying science is a religion, or that whatever is a religion is negative.
Right. Well, it's just that, like, so from the perspective of the non-scientist who appeals to science, like it's those are fundamentally different things too. Like practicing science versus referring to science, which is kind of a weird.
Yeah. Well, here's one. It's unscientific to say the science says so and so. You'll see this when it comes to. Well, you'll see this in the popular media. People will say the science says this. Science. What do you mean the science says this? The science is a method. The science, and by the way, if you were to truly say what the science said, if the science actually speaks, the science would say an extremely specific claim. It wouldn't say that so-and-so drug works. It would say, on a population of this amount in this area, the drug has this distribution for this amount of people, and there's a element of uncertainty of this amount. It would say a claim like that. It wouldn't say this drug works.
The only thing you get in science is growing probabilities of certainty. Right? Actually, I should see if I can find this quote for a second, because crap, I'm in the way here. Carl Sagan's little quote about knowledge or about truth. Let's see, I can't figure out how to get my notes to work. Let me find it for a second. What the heck? Okay, let's do this. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right, man. And I'm becoming somewhat listless and inert, so please forgive me.
No, this I'm having fun.
Great, great, great.
Okay, he says if we ever think if ever, oh my God, if we ever reach the point where we think we thoroughly understand who we are and where we come from, we will have failed. That's not the one I was thinking of, but here we go. Humans crave absolute certainty, but the history of science teaches that the most we can hope for is successive improvement in our understanding. An asymptote, that was a really important word for me to learn recently. An asymptotic approach to the universe, but with the proviso that absolute certainty will always elude us.
Yeah, let me think about that. Okay. Okay.
Right, like with a scientific experiment, you try a drug on so many people, right? And again, based on the size of your data, you can give, okay, based on this number of times we've run the experiment, this is the results we have. And from that, you get increasing levels of certainty, but you never reach 100%. You get to make that percentage of failure or of not doing what you thought it was supposed to do, or testing whatever statement you're making. That the certainty that's true goes up and up and up, because you have 99 things telling you you're right. 99. But it's like you can always run the experiment again, and so that you always have that unknown element in your experiment, or like the experiment stopped here, so this is as certain as we got.
Yeah, okay, so here's the issue here's what the scientists would say. Sure, look, we're all admitting that we get to 99%. And by the way, when he says an asymptote, I don't agree that it's of all knowledge that it's 99%. Maybe it goes from 58 to 58.5 to 58.7 to 59 to 59 point. Maybe it's bottoms at 60. That was Hillary Putnam's claim, that it's not all of knowledge per se. But either way, it doesn't matter. The scientists could say, yeah, okay, yes. Who here is saying with absolute certainty this is the correct path, or some statement is the absolute correct statement? What we're saying is, you have to choose between statements. And so if you're going to make a claim like, climate change is false, or sorry, climate change is potentially false, because you can't know for sure. You can just say 99.999, so on and so on. But at the same time, you're willing to say that junk food is horrible, and we know junk food is horrible with only 99% instead of 99.999, then there's an inconsistency. So what's behind the statements of scientists is saying you have to be, or you should be, consistent. That's, I think, a better way of thinking about it.
And I think that's fair.
And I'm not trying to justify junk food. I slipped that right in.
No, I was like, we're going to get back there eventually. We're going to have to talk about junk food again. But I mean, I was going to even just make the appeal that, like, okay, so it's sort of a practical appeal to, okay, well, this is how certain we can be of this thing. So we're going to go with what this scientific experiment has led us to do. And then, sometimes you're going to be confronted with
I see
a
much
fork
more.
in the road where
I see it so much more simple than all of this. And by the way, how do I pronounce your first name? I mean, you can cut this part out. I don't want to seem rude. Okay,
it's all right. It's all right.
Okay, so Garrett,
Yeah.
I see much more simple than this. If the scientist or someone who says what we should do is follow the science. Okay, the science doesn't tell you what to do. It tells you a set of facts. You then have to choose between that. You have to choose what you want to do. So if the science, which you shouldn't think of it as the science. I don't think scientists truly say that. In popular science, people will say that, and that's a problem. A scientist, if you said, okay, following this path, imagine it would lead to total annihilation of the Earth for whatever reason. The scientific path of just accumulating knowledge along this path, would you choose it? And if they say no, well, if they say yes, then, well, beware. And if they say no, then they're admitting that science is subservient to something else. And then they've admitted something like pragmatism, or that their goal comes first.
Right. Which pragmatism is not an exceptionally deep life philosophy, right? It's just, this works to do what I want to do. And what do I want to do? I don't know. This helps me to do, again, so it's like, it's that tree of knowledge thing where it's like, okay, so I have access to this ability to change reality, to bend it according to my will, but I don't really know what my will ought to be submitted to.
Yeah.
So it's like you can make a more and more powerful tool, but just the more powerful you make it, the more it screams at you, what am I for?
Yeah.
I loved watching that little calculation take place.
Well, I try to think before I speak and try to think about. I'm trying to think about what you're saying and relate it to some other facts and so on.
I'm trying to. This has been a fun conversation so far because I feel like my brain is like totally dead today. But
yeah, this is an interesting conversation. It's definitely one of the most relaxed of any of mine. Usually, I actually wrote a slew of notes before because I won't be able to access any of what I think I should say or what is correct with my working memory. So I wrote it down. Haven't had to check any of it.
Well, because I mean, I obviously I sent you a couple of like things I thought this would be fun to talk about with Curt, right?
It's desultory. I don't mind.
My silliest question that I sent to you was, what is a theory of everything? Or what is a theory of everything? And is a theory of everything possible? And why not?
Why is that a silly question?
Well, I mean, because it's a loaded question, right? I said, is a theory of everything possible? And why not?
Ah, I see. Let me see if I have some notes on that.
I guess it wasn't that great of a joke.
No. I did. Hey, man, like I am somnolent, so just excuse me. Let me see. During this podcast, you're spiritually exhausted, not physically. Okay, let's see what else. I think podcasting is a great. Do you find interesting? I don't see that question. Ah, yeah. That's the question I just left blank. That answer I just left blank, so I didn't get to that. Yeah. You said, is a theory... Okay. So the way I interpreted that was, is a theory of everything possible? And if not, then why not? So I put an if not automatically when I read that question.
Right. Well, because, so a theory of everything, again, a theory, and maybe I don't even, as far as I understand what a theory even is, would be a sort of model of everything, which, I mean, on a really basic level, it would be impossible to model everything because everything's already being modeled and it's everything. Mm-hmm. You can't build a computer that's as big as itself inside of that computer.
Unless there are redundancies. So that's part of
right.
Part of what, and it seems
which is true, right. Sure.
And it seems like part of reality. Like there's so much. Well, okay.
Because it speaks to one fundamental, like there's two different intuitions about the sort of bottom of reality. And one is that there is sort of a pixel depth, a resolution to reality that if we could mine to the bottom of that, we could finally find the final building blocks of what reality truly is, versus the alternative sort of spiritual intuition. And the way I even think of the word spirit is just spirit relates to the features of the thing which cannot be tested for or described. Right, the spiritual intuition of the bottom of the universe is that there is no bottom. You can just keep getting down, and that there's no. It's a fractal existence, so that means there's no final redundancy. Even it's a right. Like fractals are not like they're self-similar, but they're not self-repeating exactly.
Yeah, it depends on the kind, and so even though that's the case, the fractal is so simple. Well, the first fractal I believe was the Mandelbrot set, and it's like z equals. One is like a polynomial. Looks so absolutely simple. It can be said with, I think, 4 terms. So let's see, Mandelbrot. Even if that's the case, you generate it with what's extremely simple, and that could be. So it says z squared plus c, and that is Like that would be considered to be the theory of everything. Whether or not you're then exploring z squared plus c to all of its ramifications is different than finding z squared plus c is the equation.
Okay, so I got to re-ask the question then, because this is why I'm actually kind of happy this conversation is going the way it is, because I feel like a total idiot. I feel like I'm at the very, very edge of my understanding of anything, and I guess that probably means I'm learning something.
Okay. Okay, what's the question? You said you're going to re-ask.
So is a theory of everything even possible, and why not? So clearly, if there's an intuition, so even if there's no, because this is always what every time I think about this question, I always rely on this idea. Okay, so I just don't think you can get to the bottom of it, but you've just basically said that even if you can't get to the bottom of it, it doesn't matter. You might be able to have a very simple generative function that actually creates all of this.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm saying that it's possible. And there may be reasons that it's impossible, but I'm saying conceivable. It's plausible. Let's say that it's plausible. And it's part to me of the Theories of Everything channel is also exploring what does it mean to have a theory of everything. It's clear to a physicist because a physicist thinks extremely reductionistically, and I'm not sure reductionism is true. It seems like if we think of the world as reductionistically true, it seems like if we think of the world in reductionistic terms, then we get extremely powerful tools. And it seems like those are the most powerful tools. They can destroy us. That's how powerful they are. We've never had the ability to destroy ourselves, and we've gotten that. So
effectively, anyways.
Right. And that's because of science. I'm not saying that's good. It's obviously not good that we can kill ourselves, but it's powerful. That's for sure. So so a reductionistic approach seems to be extremely powerful. Then the question is, how far can you get with that? Well, to a physicist, a theory of everything would be, it would be unifying gravity and then something called quantum field theory. When you hear people say quantum mechanics, that to me is a sign that they're just speaking from not what they know, from what they've heard. Because technically you want to unify general relativity with quantum field theory. Why would you use quantum mechanics? There's no strong force or weak force in quantum mechanics. So obviously you want to unify them with the rest. And also it has been unified in low energy limits and people don't know that. But anyway, I'm just saying there are technicalities here. So you want to unify it at the high energy. That's what people mean when they say theory of everything as a physicist. Right. Then you can add the caveat that there may be more fundamental forces. So perhaps we want to unify those. You can add the caveat that it may not be unification that is what we should search for. I think Penrose is now a proponent of that perhaps asymmetry rather than symmetry is what is fundamental. But either way, some physics equation that it's a rule that you then follow. However, it may be that not all of reality is rule-like. And, well, it may be the case that just may be the case. I also look at when you were listening. Sorry.
No, well, I guess I want to get this thought out for a second because if these myths that have survived these, what did you say, these conserved memes,
yep.
Right? If these stick around because they are true, one thing they all have in common, and this is a Jonathan Pageauism, is that they all have a sense of the remainder. Right, and his concept of the remainder relates to any model of existence. It can model existence up to a certain point, and then there's what doesn't fit with the model. And unless your model makes space for that model is essentially an ideology, or it's this is where all these different stories about like the monster that lurks in the darkness and things like that. That the more you believe the darkness doesn't exist, the more you become convinced. Essentially, it seems like all these myths are about reductionism.
Why can't that be a part of the model? Why can't you say, like, quantum indeterminacy is essentially that? You're saying, look,
okay.
Here we have some equations, and here's the uncertainty, and look, we can predict the uncertainty. We can never predict what's going to happen precisely, but we can follow it, and in the aggregate, we can see that this is modeled by what we say it's modeled by.
Right. And I mean, that to me, so in order for you to have a theory of everything just means that you have a model that works up to a point, and then you have, after that, you have sort of faith or hope, or you have a sense of humility towards the unknown.
Yeah.
Right? So there has to be a sense of worship that exists no matter how scientific your model is.
Yeah. Just so you know, I'm not what you would consider to be someone who follows scientism. I'm just steelmanning.
We got to figure out a word for this here. No, and I appreciate this because you know way more science than I do. I like science. It stuck all right for me in high school, and that's as far as I've gone with science. And I was thinking of taking up your brilliant code and just trying to take myself a little bit deeper.
Because you can always just refund it. So for example, there's some courses I want to teach myself. I mean, there's some topics I'd like to teach myself from Brilliant as well. And I was looking to see if someone... Well, it doesn't matter. Let me think about a toe. Okay. So you have a toe. You have... Explain so-and-so. It's a complicated question. I don't see why necessarily it would imply that we have to worship what we don't know. I don't see why... the existence of the... yeah.
Okay, well, let's just put a pin in worship, because we should come back to that and try to figure out what that means. But sorry, continue with your thought.
I don't see why the remainder implies that the model is insufficient. Because you can have a model of what you are uncertain of. And it doesn't... Why do the laws have to be deterministic? Is essentially what Pajot seems to be saying. I don't see why... They're obviously not, or as far as we know, they're not deterministic. So I just don't see how that contradicts any modeling. There's a whole branch of math called...
What is a model other than something intended to determine what will happen in the future?
You can determine it with a certain probability. So, for example, one of the best models right now, so there's climate models. I'm not saying that's the best. There are financial models. Now, those have to be extremely precise because billions and trillions of dollars are on the line. And that's based on technically based on measure theory, which is a probabilistic model. So you can have models of probability. Right.
Yeah, but even your models of probability are models that have a level of probability to them. Like you're only approaching the proper understanding of that probability. I don't know if that sounded circular, but are you following where my mind's going there?
No. Say it one more time in a different manner, if you don't mind, please.
No, it's okay. I'm saying so even when you're using probabilities, there's an assumption that you've done enough of the calculation, that you understand the data set well enough to even understand what that probability is. But there's always unknowns. So your probability is only based on the amount of data you have. That's modeling reality. Your probability isn't based on this sort of quantum uncertainty or whatever. Maybe I shouldn't use words like quantum. I don't know. I don't understand the standard model or anything to do with quantum physics.
I think what you're referring to is an argument about what is probability referring to almost metaphysically, like the philosophy of probability, rather than the mathematics of probability.
Right. Well, because math, again, always would relate to real, distinct entities and objects, of which I'm not convinced exist from an objective perspective. Right. Like objects are sort of an implication of a particular standpoint, things being particular things. I mean, that's kind of maybe too obscure of a philosophical avenue to go down.
Yeah, because it's in the same way that it's difficult to affirm that there exists something independent of us, it's difficult to disconfirm it as well. So in the same, like similar arguments that are used to say that objectivity doesn't exist can be used to say that, well, you can't prove that. Sorry. The arguments that say that you can't prove objectivity exists can be used to say that you can't prove that objectivity is wrong. So in other words, it's we don't know.
Right. But I'm saying that's sort of what I like.
There's nothing about the laws of probability that rely on objectivity, though. So, for example, Carlo Rovelli, who is coming up soon. Do you know Carlo Rovelli? Okay, great physicist, loop quantum gravity, main competitor to string theory, says that all that exists are relationships. So that's extremely unobjective. Yet you can form an entire model of, well, you can form models with that. So I don't see why. I just don't see why in the data itself.
So math,
yes,
math relates to numbers, which relate to particular degrees or particular things, right? Like, what can you number? You can, like, as soon as you're using math to model a system, then that means you're mapping particular points in the system to a system that may not actually have particular points. So the math is a model of potentially an infinite amount of data. So as soon as you're figuring out a probability of some event occurring, you've only figured out the probability of it occurring given the amount of data that you're.
Hold on. Okay, sorry. Continue. Yeah, just
right
cut
here?
off. Yeah.
Okay. I was saying, my internet connection is unstable. It says. Hopefully that's not too bad. I was saying, so even whenever you're figuring out some mathematical probability of a certain event occurring, the only means you have of the only understanding even of the probability of that happening is based on however much data you fed into your probability equation.
Yeah,
right?
that's also taken into account. So you have uncertainty about your uncertainties.
Right. That's what I've been trying to get at. But you can't be sure, you can't be certain about how much uncertainty belongs in your uncertainty.
Well, I don't know how to respond to that. I need to think about this. It's just that it depends so how is one defining uncertainty? And there's a mathematical way of defining uncertainty. And you can define, well, yeah, that's why you're arguing about the philosophy of probability. What is the probability modeling per se? Is it modeling an aspect of reality? And the measure theory doesn't make any claim to a philosophy of probability. So you're arguing at one level, but you're attributing a problem to the mathematical level when your argument is with the interpretation of probability. So here's an example. There are 4 main probabilistic philosophical schools of thought. Classical, which is based on some hypothetical principle of indifference, that if you have zero knowledge of a system, then you just give them both, and there's 2 choices, you give them equal probability, so 50%. There's subjective, so that's Bayesian, if you've ever heard of Bayesian reasoning. So that's based on degree of belief, that's actually extremely subjective. Then there's frequentist, so that's empirical. How do we know that a coin is 50%? Well, we've done it. We've flipped it many times, and so and then there's propensity, and that is that this coin has a propensity. It's a metaphysical claim. This coin is actually 50%. So your claim, your dispute is with
probably more with the metaphysical idea of of randomness or probability or
like I need to think about exactly what you're saying, and I don't think I can formulate some thoughts on that now.
It's okay. But maybe it'd be still fun though to jump back to the surface level of this question though of
yeah,
because maybe you're going to help me understand more deeply. Because you said a theory of everything doesn't have to be deterministic, but isn't that sort? I mean, I guess a theory with a certain level of uncertainty. But I'm not sure how uncertain you should be. Like there's uncertainty about the level of uncertainty you have to have, and so I don't know. I guess that's just where my mind goes when I'm thinking about a theory of everything. Is that no matter, I mean, as soon as you're modeling it, even if you want to model your uncertainty, there has to be uncertainty about that. It's this continuous meta
you can do that,
uncertainty.
but you can do that mathematically. Like you can extend that up to infinity. That's why I'm having a difficult time seeing where the trouble is. So you're saying, look, you have uncertainty, but then you have uncertainty about your uncertainty. And I'm like, yeah, and you can model that, but you have uncertainty about that. You can model that, and you can take the limit of uncertainties as they go to infinity.
So you can, I mean, I don't understand the practical implications of limits because
I'll find what the term is that I'm referring to.
Yeah, send me a math video or something breaking this down sometime, because that like again, it's like most of the level on which I have to think about this stuff, because again, I'm not like super deeply scientific in my understanding of reality. It's just on an intuitive level, and it's like intuitively I can't. That's a circle that doesn't square to me. The idea of being able to model your uncertainty all the way to the end with a recursive uncertainty thing like that doesn't feel right. To me, like that's sort of, this is pretty close to my central or my fundamental like needing to have space for. I mean, the way I think of God, part of the space he sort of inhabits in my view of the world. So I'm not saying this is what everybody is talking about when they say God, but part of what God is to me is that uncertainty. I guess recently I have a sense of that, like there might be, you know, maybe you talk about there's real patterns. I couldn't even grasp onto that very well until recently. I just had something click, and it just, for some, again, it's on an intuitive level that either it feels right or it doesn't feel right on some level, and it's like I couldn't have the sense that anything could really exist except subjectively. But for some reason this past week, that idea of certain patterns really being real. I think I was having a conversation with some other friends just about shapes. There being like a real sense of what a shape is, or like I guess that's there's some discussion back in the history of different geometries.
Okay, I see where the issue is right now. I see where the issue is.
Okay,
so
okay.
I'm putting on my scientific hat, and I'm steelmanning science. And I would say the steelman of science is an instrumental claim. So you know what instrumentalism is? It's just that we don't make claims of ontology. We just say, when we do this, this happens. And this is the result. So instruments, tools, measurements. We don't say that what we're measuring is a true reflection of reality. All we know is that when we have a speedometer, like it's like a police radar, okay, then so-and-so, you understand that. Sure. I'm not quick enough right now to be able to come up with...
No, and this is fine, though.
I should have thought of a simple example. You take a ball and you drop it. I don't know why I came up with radar. But you take a ball. Okay, so you take a ball and you drop it and you can measure the height. So when we do that, this happens. And when you measure it like this is what occurs. So that's what I'm saying. And you're then saying, yeah, but that's not reality. Well, then I'm saying, yeah, but I'm not... The scientist... The steelman of the scientist doesn't concern themselves with reality as such, because we can never know reality as such. We can only know what we interact with.
But even there, again, it's like So as far as there being real patterns that genuinely sort of govern reality, I still am not convinced that you can write any of those patterns down. That there's like, I don't know. I still flip flop on
because
this.
you're
Where it's
conceding
so
of
even
reality as
E equals
yeah, you're making an ontological claim, and that's fine. Like it may be that there is a reality. I happen to think there is a reality personally, but it may not be. I don't know what that means for there not to be, but it may not be. But also, just so you know, I don't know what it means for it to be real at the same time, and I don't think anyone does without making some assumption of what it means to be real prior, and thus you're defining your real and then explaining your real in terms of that definition. So, how about this? What does it mean to be real?
You're asking me?
Yeah, it's actually an extremely difficult question. What does it mean to be real?
Oh my God.
And then because that's underneath what we're talking about.
Right. And I mean, is there more to that question? Or
Yeah. Okay. So, what does it mean to be real?
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about instrumentalism, or it's like it seems like there's kind of almost an overlap there with like science and pragmatics. There's just a sense of like you can learn how to act in the world to get certain things to happen up to a certain level of certainty or an uncertain level of certainty, but that feels intuitively okay. If I do this, this is going to happen, and I trust this sort of model. I don't know what's real beyond that. Like when I try to think about like realness does seem, I don't know, at least to talk about realness, you get tied up in these conversations about certainty. At least for me, anyways.
We have a notion of what's behind. So, for example, we'll say the screen is not real. The projector is what's real. And we think the screen is real. So we keep trying to say, what's behind? And then you wonder, well, what do I mean when I say behind, other than it's predictive in some manner, other than instrumentalism? And I don't think instrumentalism is actually what's real. I'm just saying that if you try and think about what is it exactly that you mean or one means when they say real, it's not a trivial act. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, so you get there and you're like, so what's real? And I mean, you said, okay, so there's an analogy you can make of a projector and a screen and say, okay, so the projector is what's really real and it's reflecting onto this thing. And maybe there's some ways you can push the limits of that as well, but it's kind of down to,
we're making analogy.
Again,
okay.
Well, I mean, it's a Plato's cave analogy is one that like it seems to be really resonant and or this idea of like or a Gnostic sense of reality, of that there is. Although I think the Gnostics had some deeper sense of like there being certain. I haven't studied Gnosticism that closely, but like there being some real patterns again that you could abstract and then you could write down. You could say this is the final sense of what this thing is. This is what a circle really is. This is what whatever shapes or different patterns and these whatever. I don't want to get too lost in stuff I don't understand that well, but
yeah, the way that I think of science is if-then statements. If this, then this. If this, then this. And I can't think of another way of thinking of science coherently. Then when someone says that this is real, well, what do you mean by real? That's my question.
But okay, but so science is if this, then this. But that's modeling existence. It's if this, then this, up to a certain point, and I don't know what that point is.
Yeah, okay, but implicit in what you just said, is a claim about reality. So you're saying it's modeling this, and this is real. So you're saying it's modeling this. That's, well, and then I'm saying, well, what is that it's modeling?
Right. I mean, I can say what, like, the way I visualize it sometimes. I mean, people talk about, like, as soon as you start talking about multiple dimensions is kind of a fun, I don't know if that actually amounts to anything as far as practically, or like if it will be able to, if modeling multiple dimensions actually does anything interesting as far as understanding physics. I don't know any of that stuff. But thinking about like, you know, an infinite amount of data that just continues to fold into itself and more dimensions and things like this, that as a sort of visual, it seems like the universe might be like that. I don't know, that appeals to a very, I guess, religious sense about reality that I have. I don't think that you can talk about this stuff without poetry, without religious, you know, stories or myth or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's take that. So if reality is infinite and it's infinity folding upon infinity, whatever that means, then to me that sounds nihilistic, because what difference does it make? What's going to be done is going to be done in infinite ways. So unless you want to say, which is the Leo Gura route, which is true nihilism anyway,
Okay.
then I don't see how one can accept that. Well, whatever, that reality is infinite. I mean, reality can be infinite, but I'm loosely interpreting infinity folding upon infinity when I'm saying this.
Sure.
So if one was to take that,
Yeah.
then I don't see how that's not tantamount to nihilism. Unless you're going to say, well, hey, Curt, there are some aspects of reality that just won't occur. Well, then I say, so then you've put on borders upon your infinity, and then you have a model of infinity of what can happen and what can't. So then one is falling into the trap of what one was trying to get out of by saying infinity folding upon infinity.
Right. It's interesting to me, guys, that find some sort of peace in that talk about like the Eastern thought, where like for some reason finding some actual peace in the nothingness, in saying that nothing really exists and that everything exists all at the same time, or something like that. I don't even totally get that. I mean, I've been trying to follow along with some Eastern philosopher. I guess Keiji Nishitani. I've been trying to read his book Religion and Nothingness this year, and he's such a goofy guy the way he talks. There's so much intentional, just trying to get you to. It's almost like it's a joke the way he does philosophy. It's like, and not as if like to be dismissive a joke. It's like a joke as in the only way you could get it would be to understand the joke and sort of laugh at it, right? He does so many phrases that seem...
What's his name?
Seem paradoxical. Keiji Nishitani.
Keiji?
Keiji.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Vervaeke's the one who turned me on to this guy, and had some conversations with some other friends about this book since, but I still haven't even made it through it because it's such slow reading.
He studied under Heidegger.
It's so hard. Yeah. Well, I mean, the cool thing about this guy is that he's like, there's been a lot of attempts to sort of bridge Eastern and Western thought from the Western side, but this is one of the few guys that's actually experienced and lived the Eastern side and is willing to try to bridge it from the other side, and from somebody who like sort of truly understands Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, try to communicate it to Westerners. But I guess Eastern philosophy is deeply... I don't want to say entrenched. It's a big part of the way Eastern philosophers talk, I guess, to just to get you trapped in a little paradox and say, okay, if you follow that all the way through, suddenly you're going to have this pop and you'll get it. Or like, you know, they say you have to like follow the sensation. Like there's a meditation you're supposed to do. They talk about it in the book. There's a meditation you're supposed to do is to like to follow the sensation of hearing and realize that there is no hearer. And I try to do that. I have no idea what it means. It's like there's so much of this sort of appeal to, if you get it, you get it. And there's some little loops you can get into that maybe bring you there. But I don't understand. I was trying to listen to your conversation with Zubin. I forget what his last name is, but he seemed to make some similar claims about there's certain experiences of the nothingness, or of real, like true reality, that just when you've experienced it, it's beyond being able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I guess is interesting to me. I mean, it sounds, I don't know. I don't know how you find peace in that. Some people do. You're talking about that, like if you believe in an infinite reality, then there's a nihilism implicit in that, and that challenges me because I don't know if I have an answer to that. I'm trying to think it through right now.
Well, Garrett, I only have about 5 more minutes of energy in me, just so you know. I'm so sorry.
Problem, man. This has been a crazy conversation. I feel like this is the most kind of wandering around ideas conversation I've had so far for this project.
If we were both on THC and also it's extreme amounts such that we're so tired at the same time. That's what I feel like.
This is like a fun late night 2 a.m. conversation.
Some ways better. There's advantages to it because then we can feel free to jump from topic to topic and not be concerned with extreme depth in one topic.
But it's easy to look back on it. Well, at least from an outside perspective, look and say, look at those freaking potheads.
Yeah, it may be too digressive, but they may find some value in it. I'm sure people will.
I mean, you've pushed me to the. I mean, usually, I don't know. I don't know if understanding comes from this, but this is where you begin. This is where I begin to experience awe and I have a deeper sense of whatever truth is when somebody pushes my perspective to the limit, and then I kind of somewhat either stare into that off that precipice or fall into just realizing it once again. I have to keep thinking. Kind of frustrating emotionally too, because some of these little arguments I'm pointing to have been things that I've been able to take some comfort in and say, okay, I have that figured out to the point that I want to, and I'm going to keep on thinking about something else.
Here's one that comes from Carla. If you want a book recommendation, there's only been one book on my channel I've recommended consistently, and it's Ian McGilchrist's book. But now I'm adding a second for the first time, and it's Carlo Rovelli's Order of Time. And in it, he suggests we shouldn't be thinking in terms of things. That's a mistake that's happened. Mm-hmm. We should be thinking in terms of occurrences, so happenings. Now, exactly what that means.
I think you're going to run into the same border problem there, or at least I do, at least just touching the surface of saying it that way. Because, again, who's to say where the beginning of an occurrence is or what is occurring, you know? I'm really interested it sounds like McGilchrist's just written a book that may be tantamount to the same kind of point as far as the matter with things, right?
Yeah.
Right, he's saying but
he wants
I don't
to send
know.
me the physical copy, but I cannot read that. It's way too large. I need to listen to it. And so he's like, I'm going to
I just want to have
next
it.
Year, so then I'll have to wait quite some time.
Yeah. It just looks pretty. I want to have that on my shelf.
By the way, remember I was saying that my fame level, I wish I could just be for restaurateurs. No, it's also for certain game developers. Like I want to play GTA 6, essentially. I want to play test GTA 6 and Red Dead. I was just thinking about that now.
There are certain little things you want to cash that card in on.
Because right now I'm lucky enough that some people will send me their advanced copies of their books, like Ian McGilchrist. But I'm interested, like, Ian, that's great, man. Like, if you're watching this, like, I definitely want to read that. I more want to listen to it. But I also would like to play Red Dead Redemption 3 or GTA 6. Yeah. So people,
I like playing video games and listening to audiobooks at the same time.
Well,
I don't know if that's
one of the
unhealthy for my brain,
but Hades, it seems like, is that it's a game that you can just play with your unconscious. You don't need to follow along with the story.
That is, if you're willing to give up actually reading all those unique encounters that you're only going to get to see once.
Yeah, well, what I mean is in the battles. And then when you're actually speaking to people, you can press pause on whatever audiobook or video you're watching. Yeah.
That's what I have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, man. I got to get going.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to collapse soon.
Man. I hope we can, I don't know, maybe we can do something like this again another time.
I'm excited to see what they say. I'm not happy with how I performed, and I don't want to even consider it a performance, but I think you understand I'm not happy with my conduct, let's say. And I apologize.
I feel like an absolute fool after this conversation, man. So we'll see if anybody finds it interesting. No, I know some of my friends who are following this project, and I know people. I think at least my friends that I know that I've talked to like watching me get to the end of myself and like watching the conversation get there.
Great. All right, man.
So, thanks again, man.
Take care. I'm gonna press stop.
Well, that was interesting. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to share it with a friend. Or, even better, take whatever you found interesting here and go and have a real face-to-face conversation with somebody that you care about, or somebody that you don't understand very well. I think face-to-face conversation is one of the most important tools that we have for building and maintaining real relationships and real communities. Many institutions in our lives have an incentive to crowd out these longer, more engaging interactions with short-form junk food content. The point of this project for me is to spend some time pushing back against some of those forces in my life. I want to practice listening to and engaging with people that I don't necessarily understand very well. I also want to spend some time listening to and learning from some people who seem to have a good track record of listening to and engaging with people that they disagree with. If you're interested in working on some of this stuff too, feel free to keep up with this project by subscribing and pressing the little bell thingy that lets YouTube know that you want to keep seeing these videos. I really think that if we can get better at conversation, we might actually change the world. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.